What would you do if you saw a ghost walking on water in the middle of a storm? This is the exact situation the disciples of Jesus found themselves in one terrifying night on the Sea of Galilee. Their fear of drowning was suddenly overshadowed by something even more frightening. The disciples were far from shore, their small boat tossed mercilessly by the raging sea. Darkness enveloped them as the wind howled, whipping up waves that crashed against their vessel. With each passing moment, the storm intensified, and their situation grew more dire. Fear gripped the hearts of these seasoned fishermen. They had faced storms before, but this one was different. The violent tempest threatened to overwhelm them, and they struggled desperately against the relentless assault of wind and water. As the disciples battled the elements, their minds raced with thoughts of their families, their mission, and the very real possibility that they might not survive this night. As the night wore on, exhaustion set in, and desperation began to consume the disciples. Their arms ached from battling the waves, their eyes strained against the darkness, and their spirits wavered with each passing moment. The relentless storm showed no signs of abating, and the disciples' hope dwindled with each crash of the waves against their small vessel. In the depths of their despair, something inexplicable caught their attention. A figure, barely visible through the rain and mist, appeared to be moving across the turbulent waters. How could this be? What manner of being could walk upon the raging sea? As the mysterious form drew nearer, terror gripped the disciples' hearts. They rubbed their eyes in disbelief, wondering if exhaustion had caused them to hallucinate. But the figure remained, advancing steadily towards their boat. In that moment, a chilling realization struck them all at once. "It's a ghost!" they cried out in unison, their voices barely audible above the howling wind. Panic spread through the group like wildfire, and chaos erupted on the small boat. Some of the disciples cowered in fear, while others frantically searched for anything they could use as a weapon against this supernatural threat. The disciples' minds raced with questions. Was this apparition a harbinger of their doom? Had death itself come to claim them in the midst of the storm? Their fear of drowning was suddenly overshadowed by the terror of facing an otherworldly entity on the open sea. As the ghostly figure drew ever closer, the disciples' reactions intensified. Some wept openly, others prayed fervently, and a few considered jumping into the raging waters to escape the approaching spectre. The once orderly boat became a scene of utter disarray as the disciples grappled with this new and terrifying development. In the midst of their panic, they struggled to make sense of what they were witnessing. How could any being, spectral or otherwise, traverse the tempestuous waves with such ease? The impossibility of the sight before them only deepened their fear and confusion. The disciples, who had faced many challenges in their time with Jesus, now found themselves confronted with something beyond their comprehension. But they were without him now. They were alone. As the figure continued its inexorable approach, they braced themselves for whatever fate awaited them, their hearts pounding in their chests, and their minds reeling from the supernatural encounter unfolding before their eyes. As the disciples grappled with their impending doom, a familiar voice pierced through the chaos. "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." The words echoed across the turbulent waters, cutting through the howling wind and crashing waves. Could it be? The disciples strained their eyes, trying to make sense of the impossible scene before them. The ghostly figure they had feared now took on a recognizable form. It was Jesus, their teacher and friend, walking effortlessly atop the raging sea. Shock and disbelief washed over the disciples. How could this be? Their minds struggled to comprehend the miraculous sight before them. Among the astonished disciples, Peter found his voice. Filled with a mix of fear and faith, he called out, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." His request reflected both his desire to trust and his lingering uncertainty. Jesus' response was simple, yet profound. "Come." With trembling legs, Peter stepped out of the boat. For a moment he too walked on the water, his eyes fixed on Jesus. But as he became aware of the fierce wind whipping around him, fear crept back into his heart. Peter began to sink, the waves threatening to engulf him. In desperation, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Without hesitation, Jesus reached out his hand and caught Peter. As he lifted his disciple from the churning waters, Jesus gently questioned, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" As Jesus and Peter climbed into the boat, an extraordinary calm descended upon the sea. The wind that had howled so fiercely mere moments ago now fell silent. The disciples watched in awe as the waves that had threatened to destroy them became as smooth as glass. Overwhelmed by what they had witnessed, they fell to their knees in worship, proclaiming, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The night that had begun in terror now ended in reverence and wonder. The disciples had encountered the power of their Lord in a way they had never experienced before. Their faith, once shaken by the storm, was now strengthened by the undeniable display of Jesus' authority over nature itself. What did this all mean? Why did Jesus do this? That is what we will explore in the rest of this video. Welcome to True Bible Legends. The Sea of Chaos. The sea was seen as a symbol of chaos in ancient times. Only a divine being could tame it. When Jesus walked on water, he wasn't just performing a miracle, he was making a powerful statement about his nature. Let's uncover the hidden meaning behind this extraordinary event. In the ancient world, the sea represented more than just a vast body of water. It embodied unpredictability, danger, and the unknown. The ability to control the sea was not merely a feat of strength or skill. It was a divine attribute. This belief was deeply ingrained in both Jewish and Greco-Roman cultures, shaping their understanding of the world and the divine. In the Old Testament, Yahweh is depicted as the one who subdues the sea, Psalm 89, 9-10, symbolizing his ultimate authority over chaos. By performing this miracle, Jesus wasn't just defying the laws of nature, he was demonstrating a divine power unique to God, inviting his followers to recognize and affirm his true identity. Ghost stories and divine footsteps. The Greco-Roman culture was rich with tales of ghosts and spirits, stories that both fascinated and frightened people. These ghost stories were more than mere entertainment. They formed a distinct literary genre with specific expectations and rules. In these ancient tales, ghosts were often portrayed as pale or ashen figures, only visible in the faintest light. They were believed to appear in the early hours of dawn or just before sunrise, when darkness still lingered. Too much light, it was thought, would cause these apparitions to vanish. But there was one element that ghosts could never conquer: water. The ancient world held a firm belief that ghosts were incapable of walking on water. In fact, water was seen as a destructive force for these spirits. If a ghost were to enter water, it would lead to their demise. In stark contrast to the limitations of ghosts, the gods and divine figures of ancient mythology were often depicted as having mastery over water. These powerful beings could traverse seas and rivers with ease, demonstrating their superiority over mortal and spectral entities alike. The ability to walk on water was a clear sign of divinity, a power reserved for those who ruled over the natural world. This cultural context sheds new light on the disciples' reaction when they saw Jesus walking on the water. In Mark's Gospel, we learn that the disciples were terrified, initially believing they were seeing a ghost. Their fear and confusion reveal a profound misunderstanding of Jesus' true nature. Mark's audience, steeped in the cultural understanding of ghosts and divine beings, would have been particularly struck by this moment. They knew that ghosts do not walk on water. The disciples' mistaken assumption would have seemed absurd to those familiar with the supernatural beliefs of the time. This reaction serves to highlight the disciples' spiritual blindness and their failure to recognize Jesus' divine identity. By including this detail, the Gospel writers were doing more than simply recounting an extraordinary event. They were using the cultural expectations surrounding ghosts and divine beings to emphasize Jesus' true nature. The act of walking on water was a clear demonstration of divine power. This story, then, becomes a powerful testament to Jesus' divinity. It challenges the disciples, and by extension, the readers, to look beyond their preconceptions and recognize the true nature of Christ. The cultural understanding of ghosts and their limitations serves as a backdrop against which Jesus' divine authority shines even brighter. 3 accounts, 1 divine message. As we've seen, Jesus walking on water was no ordinary miracle. It was a profound declaration of his divine nature. But how did the Gospel writers convey this message? The answer lies in the 3 distinct accounts of this event found in Matthew, Mark, and John. Each of these narratives offers a unique perspective on this extraordinary moment. While they share common elements, their differences reveal deeper truths about Jesus' identity and the disciples' understanding of him. Let's examine these accounts and uncover the divine message they collectively convey. Matthew, Mark, and John all describe Jesus walking on water after the feeding of the 5,000. In each version, the disciples are struggling against strong winds and waves when Jesus approaches them. However, the details and focus of each account differ significantly. Matthew's account emphasizes the disciples' recognition of Jesus' divinity. After Jesus calms their fears, Peter attempts to walk on water himself, but begins to sink. Jesus rescues him, prompting a powerful confession of faith from the disciples. Matthew records their words, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This declaration serves as the climax of Matthew's narrative, highlighting Jesus' divine nature. Mark's version takes a different approach. He focuses on the disciples' initial misunderstanding and lack of faith. Mark notes that when the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they thought he was a ghost. This detail is significant when we consider the cultural context of Mark's audience. As we discussed earlier, in Greco-Roman ghost stories, ghosts cannot walk on water. By including this detail, Mark subtly reinforces Jesus' divinity to readers familiar with these cultural beliefs. Mark also adds an intriguing detail about the disciples' reaction. He writes, "They did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened." This statement suggests that the disciples' failure to recognize Jesus stemmed from a deeper spiritual blindness, one that prevented them from fully grasping his true nature. John's account offers yet another perspective. Like the others, it describes Jesus walking on the stormy sea. However, John's narrative focuses more on Jesus' immediate calming presence. When the disciples see Jesus, he reassures them with the words, "It is I. Don't be afraid." This simple statement carries profound significance in John's Gospel, echoing the divine name revealed to Moses in the Old Testament. Dr. Michael Heiser notes that for a Jewish audience familiar with Old Testament symbolism, Jesus walking on water would be seen as a powerful sign of his authority over chaos. This imagery aligns Jesus with Yahweh, who controls the forces of chaos in Jewish tradition. By presenting Jesus in this light, John reinforces his divine identity to his readers. The key differences in these accounts serve to highlight various aspects of Jesus' divinity. Matthew focuses on the disciples' ultimate recognition and worship of Jesus as the Son of God. Mark emphasizes their initial misunderstanding, using it to underscore Jesus' unique nature. John underscores Jesus' divine authority over nature and his comforting presence. Together, these 3 accounts paint a comprehensive picture of Jesus' divinity. They challenge readers to look beyond the surface of the miracle and recognize the profound truth it reveals about Jesus' identity. Whether through direct confession, cultural allusions, or symbolic imagery, each gospel writer invites us to see Jesus not just as a miracle worker, but as God incarnate, walking among us. More than a miracle, Jesus' divine authority. In the gospel accounts, we see Jesus not only walking on water, but also commanding the elements. He calms the wind and waves with a word, demonstrating an authority over nature that goes beyond mere human capability. This control over the chaotic forces of the sea echoes the portrayal of God in the Old Testament. Throughout the Hebrew scriptures, we find vivid descriptions of God's power over the sea and its creatures. In Job 26:12-13, we read, "By his power he churned up the sea, his hand pierced the gliding serpent." Similarly, Psalm 89:9 declares, "You rule over the surging sea. When its waves mount up, you still them." These passages paint a picture of God as the supreme ruler over chaos and disorder. By walking on the stormy sea and calming its fury, Jesus was demonstrating the same authority attributed to God in the Old Testament. He wasn't simply performing an impressive feat. He was revealing his divine identity through actions that would have been immediately recognizable to those familiar with Jewish scripture. This connection becomes even more apparent when we consider the cultural context of the ancient Near East. In many religions of the region, deities were often depicted as subduing sea monsters to restore order. The God of Israel, Yahweh, is similarly portrayed as conquering these forces of chaos. Psalm 74:13-14 declares, "It was you who split open the sea by your power. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan." Jesus' mastery over the sea, therefore, wasn't just about controlling the weather. It was a statement about his role in the cosmic order. By demonstrating power over the chaotic waters, Jesus was aligning himself with the divine authority of Yahweh. This imagery carries through to the book of Revelation, where the final victory of God is depicted as the punishment of Leviathan, the sea dragon. The phrase, "the sea was no more," in Revelation 23, signifies the complete subjugation of chaos. Jesus' act of walking on water can be seen as a foreshadowing of this ultimate triumph over disorder. Dr. Michael Heiser explains that for a Jewish audience, Jesus walking on water would have been understood as a profound theological statement. It wasn't just about defying gravity. It was about Jesus revealing himself as the one who imposes order on chaos, a role reserved for God alone. In John's Gospel, this connection is made even more explicit. John consistently portrays Jesus as the incarnate Word of God, using the divine name I Am in reference to him. When Jesus approaches the disciples on the stormy sea, his words, "It is I," literally I am in Greek, echo the divine name revealed to Moses. By walking on water, Jesus wasn't simply performing a miracle. He was demonstrating his equality with God, showing that he possessed the same authority over creation as Yahweh himself. This act, more than any other, convinced Jesus' disciples that he was indeed the Son of God, leading to their confession of faith and worship, from misunderstanding to recognition. As Jesus walked on water, his disciples faced a moment of profound revelation, yet their journey to understanding was not instant. It began with fear and confusion, slowly transforming into recognition and faith. This progression mirrors the path many take in grasping the true nature of Jesus. When the disciples first saw Jesus approaching their boat on the stormy sea, their reaction was one of terror. They believed they were seeing a ghost, a supernatural apparition that filled them with dread. This misunderstanding stemmed from their limited perspective and cultural beliefs. The disciples' fear reveals their inability to comprehend the divine nature of what they were witnessing. Their initial reaction showcases a deeper issue, a hardness of heart that prevented them from recognizing Jesus even after witnessing his previous miracles. Mark's Gospel emphasizes this spiritual blindness, noting that the disciples did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. This hardness of heart led them to believe the absurd rather than recognize the divine presence before them. However, Jesus did not leave his disciples in this state of fear and confusion. He immediately identified himself, saying, "It is I. Don't be afraid." These simple words carried profound significance, echoing the divine name revealed to Moses in the Old Testament. Jesus' self-identification served as an invitation for the disciples to move beyond their fear and recognize his true identity. As Jesus stepped into the boat, a remarkable transformation occurred. The wind died down, and the disciples' fear gave way to worship. Matthew's Gospel records their powerful confession, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This moment marked a significant shift in their understanding. No longer did they see Jesus merely as a teacher or miracle worker. They recognized him as the divine Son of God, worthy of their worship and allegiance. This journey from misunderstanding to recognition is not unique to the disciples. It reflects the path many take in coming to understand Jesus' true nature. Like the disciples, we often begin with misconceptions, viewing Jesus through the lens of our limited understanding or cultural preconceptions. We may see him as a good teacher, a moral example, or even a supernatural being, but fail to grasp his full divinity. The disciples' story invites us to move beyond these initial misunderstandings. It challenges us to look deeper, to consider the implications of Jesus' actions and words. Just as the disciples' eyes were opened when Jesus calmed the storm, we too are called to recognize the divine authority present in Jesus' life and ministry. This progression from fear to faith also emphasizes the importance of personal encounter with Jesus. The disciples' understanding didn't come through theological debate or intellectual reasoning alone. It came through witnessing Jesus' power firsthand and hearing his words of comfort and authority. Similarly, our journey to recognizing Jesus' divinity often involves personal experiences and encounters that challenge our preconceptions and open our eyes to his true nature. The disciples' ultimate recognition of Jesus as the Son of God serves as a powerful testimony. Their confession of faith and act of worship signify a deeper understanding and acceptance of Jesus' divine nature. This moment of recognition becomes an invitation to all who encounter the story, an invitation to move past fear and misunderstanding, to open our eyes to the reality of who Jesus truly is, and to respond with faith and worship. Walking on water. Walking in faith. As we've uncovered the deeper meaning behind Jesus walking on water, we're left with a profound question. How does this understanding impact our faith today? The Gospel accounts reveal more than just a miraculous event. They present a powerful portrait of Jesus' divine nature. His mastery over the chaotic sea echoes God's authority in the Old Testament. The disciples' journey from fear to recognition mirrors our own spiritual growth. By walking on water, Jesus demonstrated his equality with God, possessing the same power over creation as Yahweh himself. This revelation challenges us to look beyond the surface of biblical narratives. When we grasp the cultural context and symbolism, these ancient stories come alive with new significance. Thank you for watching. We hope your faith is strengthened or that you would find new faith in Jesus. Please like and subscribe to keep up with our new videos.